Good evening, and welcome to News of the World. It's Thursday, July 16th. Tonight we drift slowly across 28 countries from Russia to South Korea. There's nothing you need to do, and nowhere you need to be. Settle in, and let the world turn. Russia, one of the world's great energy producers, is looking abroad for gasoline. According to sources cited by Reuters, Moscow has been seeking more fuel from India, a reversal that would have seemed improbable not long ago. The cause sits at the heart of the war with Ukraine. Ukrainian strikes on Russian refineries have disrupted domestic fuel production, creating a gap that Russia now needs to fill from somewhere else. There's a quiet irony in this, and it's worth pausing over. Russia has long sold oil and gas to the world. India in particular has been a major buyer of Russian crude. Now that same relationship may be flowing the other way. Finished gasoline moving back toward the country that once supplied the raw material. It's a sign of how the war has pressed inward, past the front lines and into the machinery of daily life. Refineries are not abstract things. They heat homes, fuel cars, keep supply chains moving. When they falter, the effects ripple outward, quietly at first, then more plainly. If you're still with me, hold this image for a moment, a country of vast oil fields asking a distant partner for help keeping its engines running. It doesn't tell you everything about this war, but it tells you something about how far the reach of it has grown and how even the largest powers can find themselves needing what they thought they'd always have. Moldova has taken another quiet step toward the European Union this week, opening what's called the External Relations Cluster in its accession negotiations. It sounds technical, and in a way it is. These are the formal conversations about how a country aligns its foreign policy, its trade agreements, its diplomacy with the wider European bloc. But each cluster opened is a door that stays open, and for Moldova, a small country nestled between Romania and Ukraine, every door matters. The journey toward membership is long and measured in chapters, not headlines. Moldova, like its neighbor Ukraine, has been moving through these clusters steadily, not rushing, but not standing still either. This particular step touches on how Moldova would relate to the world as part of the Union, its commitments, its partnerships, its place at the table. There's a deeper current here too. Moldova's ties to Romania run deep. Shared language, shared history, family lines that cross the Prut River without much fuss. Some in both countries talk openly of reunification. Others prefer the path Moldova walks now, its own sovereignty, its own seat, its own steady walk westward. Either way, the direction is clear. A small country on the edge of a large union, doing the patient work of belonging. And tonight, that work continues. One cluster, one conversation, one quiet step at a time. Botswana has given the world another remarkable stone. In the Karowe mine, a diamond weighing 1,305 carats has been recovered, and this is the 10th time this single mine has produced a stone of such extraordinary size. That's worth pausing on. One mine, in one country, repeatedly yielding diamonds that most mines would encounter once in a lifetime, if that. Botswana's relationship with diamonds runs deep. For decades, these stones have shaped the nation's story, not just as treasures, but as the foundation beneath much of the country's progress. A find like this is a reminder of what lies beneath the Kalahari's quiet surface. There's something humbling about a stone of this size. It formed deep in the earth, under pressure and heat we can barely imagine, over a span of time that makes human history look brief. Then someone found it. Now it sits above ground, waiting to be studied, cut perhaps, or simply marveled at. If you're still with me, think of this, that somewhere in Botswana, people are going about their evening, and beneath their feet the earth still holds wonders. The Karowe mine will keep working. The land will keep its secrets, and now and then, it will offer one up. Bulgaria has quietly stepped away from the coalition of the willing, the group of nations coordinating support for Ukraine. Prime Minister Radev made the decision, saying Bulgaria has no place in that coalition. It's a shift that has drawn attention across Europe, where the question of how far each country's involvement should extend has grown more complicated in recent months. But stepping back from the coalition doesn't mean stepping away from Ukraine entirely. Bulgaria has pledged to continue offering diplomatic and energy support, a distinction that matters, especially for a country that has weathered its own share of regional uncertainty. Energy ties here run through real infrastructure, real supply lines, real winter nights. The move has prompted talk about whether other nations might follow, whether this signals broader doubts about the path ahead. Perhaps it does. But from Sofia, the decision seems to reflect a particular reading of Bulgaria's role, not a retreat from concern, but a recalibration of how that concern is carried forward. If you're still with me, it's worth sitting with that distinction. A country can choose a different channel and still care about the same destination. In this corner of the world where borders have shifted and alliances have turned many times, those choices are rarely simple. Bulgaria keeps its hand extended, just along a different line. The night settles over the Balkans, and the story continues. Cuba knows something about endurance. Through decades of scarcity and waiting, its people have built a resilience that visitors often admire. But even resilience has edges. And these days, those edges are showing. The island's power grid has collapsed, not just once, but in a string of failures that have left homes and streets in darkness. Refrigerators go warm, fans go still. The small machinery of daily life grinds to a halt. Residents describe a weariness shifting from familiar frustration towards something closer to resignation. Part of the pressure comes from outside. Fuel is harder to come by. Sanctions have tightened again, pressing on tourism and energy supplies. And the geopolitical noise around Cuba, talk of military scenarios, of great power maneuvering, feels distant from the quiet reality of a household sitting in the dark. What's striking is how ordinary the hardship has become, and how extraordinary that ordinariness is. Families wait, they share what they have. They get through the night, and then the next one. But the analysis suggests something is shifting, that the well of patience, deep as it is, may not be bottomless. If you're still with me, hold that thought. The lights will come back, as they always do. The question is, what carries people through until they do? Ethiopia has opened a national dialogue, a month-long forum meant to bring voices from across the country into one conversation. It is the kind of effort that sounds straightforward in theory, but carries enormous weight in practice, and already, opposition parties have voiced concerns about the process. That criticism matters, not because it undermines the gathering, but because it shows how much is at stake. Ethiopia has been through a great deal in recent years. There are fears of renewed conflict. There are economic pressures and questions of debt. There is the everyday challenge of feeding communities in a country where food aid has played a significant role. Any national conversation must hold all of that, and the people watching it know it. The idea behind a dialogue is simple. Sit together, speak honestly, listen. But in a country as large and diverse as Ethiopia, with so many communities and so much history, nothing about it is easy. The fact that it is happening at all says something. The fact that it faces criticism says something too, that people care enough to demand it be done right. Where this forum leads, nobody can say yet. It has opened its doors and the work of talking has begun. For a country that has known both pride and pain, that beginning is worth marking, and worth holding gently as the night settles in. Guinea's coffee region has always had a way of calling people back. In the forested hills where the beans grow slow under shade, families have lived for generations, and many who left, for work or for safety, have carried the memory of that place with them wherever they went. Now some of them are returning. The International Organization for Migration has been telling the story of what that return looks like, and it is not a simple homecoming, it is something more patient than that. People come back to soil they know, to relatives they recognize, to a rhythm of life that hasn't changed as much as the world around it. And with them, they bring new ideas, small plans, new ways of working the land, a quiet sense that the future might be built from the same things the past was made of. Coffee has always been a crop that rewards patience. You tend the trees, you wait for the harvest, you dry the beans carefully. Maybe that is why return fits here. The people coming home are not in a rush. They are settling in, looking around, asking what is possible. If you're still with me, picture those hills at dusk, the air cooler as the sun drops, the smell of earth and leaves, and somewhere on a porch, someone who left years ago sitting with family again, thinking about what to plant next. It is a small story, in a way, but it is the kind that holds. Liberia has a new tool for keeping watch over how development projects unfold across the country. The African Development Bank has launched a digital platform there designed to strengthen oversight of the projects it supports. It's the kind of news that might not make a lot of noise. There are no crowds, no ceremonies that linger in the memory. But in a country still finding its footing after years of conflict and the Ebola crisis, the question of whether a promised project actually arrives, and arrives as promised, matters deeply. A digital platform means data. It means tracking. It means that somewhere, someone can look at a screen and see whether the work is going where it's supposed to go. Liberia knows what it is to have promises disappear into the distance. So a tool like this, quiet as it is, carries real weight. It's not a solution on its own. Oversight never is, but it's a thread pulled tighter. A way of making the work visible. And if you're still with me, that's worth sitting with for a moment. The small mechanics of trust, the systems that hold development to account, these are the things that decide whether a community feels seen, whether effort turns into something lasting. Liberia is putting another piece of that into place. Austria is one of 5 European countries being urged to place strict human rights guardrails at the heart of their plans for so-called return hubs. The call comes from the Council of Europe, the continent's human rights body, and it names Austria alongside Denmark, Germany, Greece, and the Netherlands. Return hubs are facilities where people whose asylum claims have failed would be held while arrangements are made to send them home or elsewhere. Several governments have been exploring the idea as they look for firmer ways to manage migration. But the Council's message is that whatever the political logic, the rights of the people inside these hubs cannot be an afterthought. When vulnerable people are gathered in places that sit at the edge of ordinary legal protections, the safeguards matter: access to lawyers, detention conditions, protection against being returned to danger. Austria and its partners are each at different stages with their plans, and the details remain limited. But the reminder from Strasbourg is that the design of these facilities will say something lasting about how Europe treats the people it has decided must leave. It is the kind of policy that looks technical from far away and deeply human up close. And the nudge is quiet but clear. Build the protections in from the start, because what happens at the margins reveals what a society truly values. Myanmar has known more conflict than quiet in recent years. So when word comes that opposing sides may be open to dialogue, it carries a particular weight. Thailand's foreign minister has said as much, that the parties in Myanmar's conflict have shown a willingness to talk. Thailand has been mediating, and by some accounts these talks have resumed. It is a fragile signal, not a settlement. But in a country where so many lives have been upended, even the suggestion of a conversation feels worth noting. There is more to it. Myanmar's leader, Min Aung Hlaing, is reported to be planning a visit to Thailand next month. What comes of that meeting and of the broader mediation effort remains uncertain. Neighbors watching from across the region will know that Myanmar's troubles rarely stay neatly within its borders. Refugees, trade, and security all spill outward. But the heart of the matter is inside Myanmar itself, among people who have waited a long time for something to shift. Peace, if it comes, will not arrive in a single gesture or a single meeting. It rarely does. But the door being open, even slightly, is not nothing. For families separated by fighting, for communities holding together through hardship, the thought that someone might sit down and talk, that is a thing to carry through the night, gently, without demanding too much of it. Molly is thinking about the sky. Not in the way people everywhere look up at night, though that too, but in the practical, ambitious way that nations do when they want satellites of their own. The government in Bamako is weighing whether to create a national space agency, a small office on paper that could mean a great deal in the years ahead. The idea is tied to something larger, a shared satellite scheme among the Alliance of Sahel states, the partnership Mali has built with Burkina Faso and Niger, 3 countries with deep challenges on the ground: security, drought, displacement, now looking upward together, pooling what they have toward a common orbit. It's easy to forget, from a distance, how much of modern life depends on what's above the atmosphere, the weather forecasts, the crop monitoring, the communications across vast and sometimes roadless terrain. For countries in the Sahel, where the land is wide and the infrastructure is thin, a satellite isn't luxury. It's a tool, a way to see your own country clearly, to plan, to respond. Whether Mali follows through and how quickly remains to be seen. These things move slowly, and they should. Space is patient work. But the ambition itself is worth noting, a reminder that even in hard seasons, a country can lift its eyes towards something beyond the next horizon. In Namibia, the old arrangement between elephants and people is being tested. Elephants here have long moved across vast distances, following water and browse through some of the driest country on the continent, but the ground they share with farming communities is shrinking. Researchers describe a kind of turf war growing steadily as elephants and people compete for the same scarce resources, and climate strain, they warn, could double the risk of these encounters turning dangerous. The pressure builds in a way that's easy to understand and hard to solve. Less rain means fewer water points. Fewer water points means elephants travel further, more often through settled land. Crops get trampled, water stores get disturbed, tempers flare for communities living alongside these animals. Patience is real, but not endless. For the elephants, there is simply less room than there used to be. Conservation groups working across the Keza landscape, the vast transfrontier region spanning 5 southern African nations, have been strengthening community-led approaches. The thinking is straightforward. People who benefit from wildlife are more likely to live alongside it, but the pressure comes from directions no policy can fully hold back. What's happening here isn't a crisis, not yet. It's a slow tightening. Namibia has always asked hard questions about how people and wildlife share space. These days, the questions are getting harder. Slovenia has taken a quiet but meaningful step, fully integrating with the European Union's electricity market by joining what's known as the Mari platform, for a small country nestled between the Alps and the Adriatic. This is less about headlines and more about the invisible machinery that keeps lights on across a continent. Mari is part of how European nations share the delicate balancing act of electricity. When demand shifts in one place, when supply wobbles in another, power flows across borders to fill the gaps. Slovenia has now completed its place in that system. What that means in practical terms is that Slovenia's grid is more deeply woven into the European fabric. Electricity doesn't care much for borders, and increasingly, neither do the systems that manage it. A surge of power in one corner of Europe can help meet a spike in demand somewhere else, and Slovenia is now part of that exchange in a fuller way. It's the kind of news that won't stir much excitement at a dinner table. But there's something quietly remarkable about nations agreeing to keep each other's lights on, treating electricity not as a national possession, but as a shared resource flowing where it's needed. This week, a small country took its full seat at a very large table, where the work is steady, the stakes are real, and the results are measured in reliability rather than applause. Nigeria has been working through a familiar and stubborn problem, the long shadow of corruption among its most powerful officials. This week, an anti-graft agency won the right to seize 48 properties tied to a former attorney general. It's the kind of story that can feel abstract until you sit with it for a moment. 48 properties, land, and buildings accumulated, the agency argues, through means that weren't honest. The former attorney general hasn't yet had his full say in court, and these cases often move slowly through the Nigerian system, appealed and reappealed before anything is truly settled. But the forfeiture order stands for now. What gives the story weight beyond the courtroom is that Nigerians know this terrain well. A journalist spent 2 months jailed recently, held pending trial for reporting on corruption. The press keeps watch. The courts weigh evidence. And ordinary people in Lagos, in Kano, in smaller towns that don't make headlines, carry the real cost of what was taken. In roads that were never built and clinics left under-equipped. 48 properties. It's a number that asks a quiet question about what was owed. And to whom? The case will continue. The country will keep watching. And somewhere in that long process, the slow work of accountability may take another small step forward. Croatia sits on the Adriatic, and these days that coastline is doing more than drawing travelers. The country's liquefied natural gas terminal is set to expand, a project that matters well beyond Croatia's own borders. The terminal was built to help secure energy for the region. Now it's growing. The reason reaches east. Ukraine has been working to secure more energy imports, and Croatia's terminal could become part of that supply chain. It's a quiet kind of solidarity. Infrastructure doing the work that words sometimes can't. The expansion means more capacity, more ships able to offload fuel, more gas moving through the region's networks. For Croatia, it's also a sign of how the country's role is shifting. A place known for its coast, its football, its old stone cities, now becoming an energy crossroads. The geography makes sense when you think about it. The Adriatic gives Croatia a gateway to the Mediterranean, and beyond, ships arrive. Gas flows, the effects ripple outward. There's something steady about a story like this. No drama, no spectacle, just concrete and steel doing their part, and a country finding itself at the center of something larger than its own needs. The terminal will keep growing, and the gas will keep moving, quietly through the night and onward. Guatemala is looking ahead to a quieter kind of progress. The country has announced plans to bring 300 electric buses onto its roads beginning in 2027. It's a modest number by some measures, but for a nation where city streets have long hummed with older diesel engines, it marks a real shift, a decision to think about the air people breathe, not just the destinations they need to reach. Electric buses don't make much noise. That's part of their appeal. If you've ever stood on a busy corner in Guatemala City, waiting beneath the afternoon sun, you know that the sound of traffic is also the sound of exhaust, of heat held in place. 300 buses won't transform all of that, but they'll begin to change the texture of a commute, a school run, an ordinary day. The plan is still a few years away from taking shape. 2027 sounds distant until you realize how quickly these things arrive once they start. For now, it's a promise on paper, a country deciding that the future of getting around should be a little cleaner, a little gentler on the people who ride. If you're still with me, picture those buses one day pulling up to a stop, almost silent. The doors opening onto a street that feels just a little different. Not transformed, just better. Tanzania is quietly reshaping how it relates to the world beyond its borders, and the reasons seem to lie as much at home as abroad. A shift in foreign policy is underway, and by all accounts, it's being shaped by domestic power struggles, the kind of internal contest that often goes unnoticed beyond a country's own borders, but quietly redirects where it looks, who it listens to, what it reaches for. It's not a dramatic turn. Tanzania has long kept a steady, deliberate posture in international affairs, and what seems to be happening now is less a reversal than a recalibration. The country is feeling its way towards something, and that something is still taking shape, and there's a current of ambition running beneath all of this. Air Tanzania is eyeing routes to the United States and Europe, waiting on fleet expansion before making the leap. A new gold mine has its team, its financing, its permits. Now it just has to be built. Conservation programs along the coast are training a new generation of stewards. Progress against mother-to-child HIV transmission continues steadily in clinics and communities. So Tanzania's story this week isn't just one headline, it's a country in motion, adjusting its stance abroad while building, expanding, and tending to things at home. A country deciding how it faces the world, while also deciding what kind of country it's becoming. Seychelles, that scatter of granite and coral islands in the western Indian Ocean, has been quietly drawing closer to its neighbor Reunion. The two have signed a security agreement aimed at drug trafficking and money laundering, problems that touch many island nations where small populations and long coastlines can make policing a particular challenge. Reunion is a French overseas territory, and the ties between it and Seychelles run deeper than geography alone might suggest. President Hermany recently reaffirmed 50 years of friendship between Seychelles and France at a Bastille Day reception held in La Réunion. A reminder that these waters have long been shared, not merely mapped. The new accord is practical in its aims. Drug trafficking and money laundering are not abstract concerns for island communities. They reach into families and livelihoods. When two places agree to face those challenges together, it is a quiet kind of resolve, not the sort that makes noise far away, but the sort that matters close to home. For Seychelles, which depends so much on its reputation as a place of beauty and safety, protecting what the islands are is inseparable from protecting what they offer the world. And so, in the warm middle of the year, a partnership takes shape between neighbors across open water, steady, deliberate, and built to last. The Marshall Islands sit in the Central Pacific, a scatter of low atolls whose modern history is inseparable from the nuclear age. For years, the United States conducted atomic tests in these waters, and in the decades that followed, veterans, including Pacific Islanders, took part in the slow, hazardous work of cleaning up what was left behind. A piece circulating in American foreign policy circles carries a plain accusation that the United States is breaking its promise to Pacific Island veterans. The promise, as these veterans understood it, was recognition and care for the health consequences of service in contaminated places. For many of them, that recognition has been slow to come, or hasn't come at all. At the same time, there are signs of movement. Veterans of nuclear cleanups could soon become eligible for compensation, a shift that, if it arrives, would answer calls that have echoed across the Pacific for decades. For the Marshall Islands, this isn't an abstract policy debate. It's about people who did difficult work in difficult conditions and families who have lived with what followed in a place where the nuclear legacy is part of the soil and the reef and the stories people tell. Nothing is settled yet. Legislation takes time, and promises once deferred are not easily restored. But the conversation is alive, and these days, the voices from the Marshalls and across the Pacific are finding listeners who hadn't heard them before. Antigua and Barbuda, that twin island nation in the Eastern Caribbean, has signed health agreements with China, partnerships aimed at strengthening medical care for its people. For a small country, health infrastructure is always a careful balance. You build what you can, and you reach for partnerships where they make sense. These agreements follow a pattern the nation knows well, drawing on international relationships to fill gaps that geography and scale make hard to close alone. There's something steadying about it. The diplomacy of care, you might call it. Not the loud kind that fills news cycles, but the quieter sort that shows up eventually in clinics, in training, in equipment that arrives and gets put to use. Antigua and Barbuda sits at a crossroads, Atlantic on one side, Caribbean on the other, with a long history of looking outward, because it has to. For a place this size, survival has always meant building relationships far beyond its shores. A health agreement signed far from home is an extension of that same instinct. If you're still with me, picture it, a meeting room a long way from the sea, two delegations across a table, and somewhere behind it all, the quiet hope that care will reach a little further than it did before. That's worth carrying into the night. Mauritania sits on the western edge of the Sahara, where the desert meets the Atlantic, and these days something new is taking shape in its capital. Nouakchott, the International Finance Corporation, has put $15 million behind Grands Hotels de Mauritanie, a project to build the country's first international five-star hotel. It's a quiet kind of news, maybe, but for a nation that has long depended on mining and fishing, it carries a different weight. The idea is simple enough. Business travelers need somewhere to stay. Conferences need somewhere to meet. And behind the glass and concrete of a new hotel, there are jobs. The kind that didn't exist before, in hospitality, in management, in the small supply chains that grow up around any large establishment. The IFC frames it as part of a broader effort to diversify Mauritania's economy, to give it another foothold beyond the extractive industries that have defined so much of its modern story. Whether a single hotel can shift the trajectory of a country, no one would claim, but it's a marker. A place where visitors from across the region and beyond might land and stay and see Mauritania not as a waypoint but as a destination. And for the people who will work there, it's something more immediate, a livelihood, a craft to learn, a door opening onto something new. If you're still with me, we'll let that settle and move on. Nicaragua has turned its diplomatic gaze toward Beijing. After years of formal ties with Taiwan, the country has broken that relationship and established diplomatic relations with China instead. It's the kind of shift that sounds bureaucratic on paper, but carries real weight in the wider world. For a small nation, choosing between Taipei and Beijing is never just about embassies or trade agreements. It's about which version of the global order you're standing in. Taiwan has lost another partner, and China has gained one in a slow, patient contest that stretches across continents and decades. For Nicaragua, the decision comes under President Daniel Ortega's government, which has increasingly turned away from Western influence. If you're still with me, you might wonder what this means for ordinary Nicaraguans. In the short term, probably very little that's visible. Roads and bridges may come, backed by Chinese financing. A flag will change on a building somewhere in Managua, but the deeper story is about alignment, where a country places itself when the world's great powers are pulling in different directions. Nicaragua has made its choice quietly, the way these things often happen. And the meaning of it will unfold in the months and years ahead, as it always does. Guinea-Bissau sits on West Africa's Atlantic coast, a small country of mangrove swamps and scattered islands, where reaching a clinic can mean a long journey by foot or by boat. The United Nations Development Program is now backing an effort there to strengthen community health networks through geomapping, a way of charting where health services exist and where the gaps remain. The idea is straightforward, even if the terrain isn't. By mapping health posts, community workers, and the paths that connect them to the people they serve, the initiative aims to give the country a clearer picture of care as it actually reaches people. In a nation where many communities live far from cities and hospitals, knowing what's where can shape decisions about supplies, staffing, and support that might otherwise be made in the dark. Guinea-Bissau has weathered years of political instability, and its health system has carried the weight of that. So this is quiet, patient work, the kind that doesn't make headlines but slowly changes how a country understands itself. It's about making sure every community appears on the map, its needs visible, its people counted. If you're still with me, picture those points appearing one by one across a coastline, each one a place where someone waits for care and where someone arrives to offer it. India and the United Kingdom have switched on a trade agreement that's been years in the making, and for ordinary people in both countries, the first thing they'll notice is the price tags. The deal lowers barriers on goods crossing between them, which means certain things, the everyday items, the imports people actually buy, should cost a little less on each side. It's the kind of news that doesn't arrive with fanfare. It arrives quietly, in shop aisles and on import dockets, in the slow arithmetic of tariffs coming down. For India, the agreement opens British markets wider to its goods, and for Britain, still finding its footing outside the European Union, India represents one of the largest consumer populations on the planet. There's a practical friendship at work here, built on commerce rather than ceremony. Trade deals rarely change everything overnight. What they do is shift the current. A little easier here, a little cheaper there, a few more opportunities for businesses that have been watching and waiting. If you're still with me, consider the simple idea behind all of it. Two countries deciding that more exchange, not less, is how they want to move forward. The details will unfold in the weeks and months ahead, as businesses adjust and consumers notice what's changed on the shelf. For now, the agreement is in effect, and the quiet work of it has begun. Cyprus has lived with a line drawn across it for more than 50 years now, a buffer zone running through the heart of an island that was once whole. Families grew old on either side. Streets in Nicosia still dead-end at checkpoints, and yet this week, there is movement again. New peace talks have begun, aimed at what so many attempts have tried and failed to do, to bring the island back together. The division reaches back to 1974, when a coup, tied to a military junta in Greece, gave Turkey the opening to invade. What followed displaced communities on both sides, and the island has stood split ever since, with the United Nations buffer zone holding the silence between two halves. The shape of these new talks is still forming. We don't know yet what will be different this time, or whether the old walls, political, territorial, human, can be softened. But there is something quietly remarkable about the attempt itself. After 50 years, the conversation hasn't stopped. Someone is still willing to sit down, look across the table, and ask whether the line can finally be crossed. For an island that has waited this long, patience is nothing new, and hope, it seems, isn't either. Monaco is a place that fits easily in the imagination. A sliver of coastline, a famous harbor, a principality smaller than most city parks. But these days, something quieter than the Grand Prix is drawing attention across the Atlantic. The Embassy of Monaco, together with the Smithsonian Associates and the Princess Grace Foundation USA, is exploring the enduring cultural legacy of Princess Grace. That name still carries weight on both sides of the ocean. Before she was a princess, she was Grace Kelly, an American actress whose poise on screen made her one of Hollywood's most admired figures. Then she married Prince Rainier of Monaco, and a small principality on the Mediterranean found itself with a cultural ambassador whose influence would outlast her years. What these organizations are doing now is not simply looking back at a famous life. It's an effort to understand what she left behind, the art's patronage, the foundation that still carries her name, the sense that a place as small as Monaco could hold a cultural ambition far beyond its size. The Smithsonian lends the conversation a certain weight. The foundation keeps it personal, and Monaco, for its part, holds the memory close. If you're still with me, you might picture a room where people have gathered to talk about a woman who crossed an ocean and changed a country's sense of itself. The harbor lights of Monte Carlo are a long way off, but the story, somehow, still travels. Papua New Guinea, like much of the world, is reckoning with what happens when images and voices can be faked so well that seeing is no longer believing. The deepfake problem, as it's come to be called, has unsettled communities and democracies far from the places where the technology was built. And now, according to the Lowy Institute, Papua New Guinea is shaping its own answer to it. That matters here in particular. This is a country of more than 800 languages, where information moves through village networks and radio, and, increasingly, through phones in people's pockets. Trust in what you see and hear isn't just a technical question. It's a question about how communities decide together what's real. The specifics aren't fully known yet, but the very fact that Papua New Guinea is working on this rather than waiting to inherit solutions designed elsewhere says something. Smaller nations are often told to follow the lead of bigger ones, to adopt frameworks built in other contexts. Papua New Guinea seems to be asking what fits its own instead. What does truth look like in a place where oral tradition still carries weight, where a voice on a phone might be a family update or a warning or something made to deceive? It's a quiet kind of leadership, not the sort that grabs attention, but the sort that asks, early and carefully, how to live honestly in a world where the tools themselves can lie. South Korea's central bank has done something it hasn't done in more than 3 years. It raised its key interest rate to 2.75%. The last time the Bank of Korea moved rates upward was back in 2023. What prompted the move, according to reports, is inflation pressure filtering in from the war involving Iran, a reminder of how far the ripples of conflict can travel, from oil markets to a meeting room in Seoul. For a country that imports so much of its energy, any disruption in the Middle East lands quickly at home. Higher rates are the bank's way of pressing back, making borrowing a little more expensive, cooling demand just enough to keep prices from climbing further. It's a delicate balance. Raise too little and inflation keeps its grip. Raise too much and you slow the very economy you're trying to protect. What makes this moment worth noticing is the pause that came before it. 3 years of holding steady, watching, waiting. The decision to move again suggests the bank sees something in the numbers it couldn't ignore. And for ordinary people across South Korea, the change will be subtle at first. A slightly higher mortgage payment here. A slightly more cautious business loan there. The kind of shift you feel in the quiet of your own ledger, long before it makes any headlines. And that's the world for tonight. Wherever you are, whatever tomorrow holds, rest easy. The world will keep turning slowly while you sleep, and we'll take another quiet trip around it tomorrow night. Good night.